Everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm talking about space exploration, young adult literature, science fiction, and all of the above with author Mark Benson. Mark, thank you for joining.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely glad to have you. You're the author of the book Isaac in the Sky, and I also know that you have a role with NASA, a solar system ambassador, which is not something that I'm familiar with. So I'm curious about that and your path to authoring.
So, yeah, happy to talk about all of it. Yeah, Solar System Ambassador is quite the long title.
Yeah, yeah. So how did that come to be? What does that involve?
Yeah, so I was volunteering at the Adler Planetarium here in Chicago and working with telescopes in the observatory and teaching people about the night sky. And just kind of from talking to people there, I ended up learning about an opportunity to go out to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena to get kind of a behind the scenes look at an end of mission and that they were doing for a mission to Saturn years ago. And so the Adler kind of led to that. And then while I was there, some people mentioned the ambassador program to me, which I had never heard of. And I found out that it's a really cool thing. I applied for it and got it, and I've been doing it for about 10 years. And basically, they have ambassadors all over the country. I think if I can't remember the exact number, maybe a few hundred. And we put on events of our own, so we're able to kind of use our own skill set. So no two ambassadors kind of handle their own business, the same. And
Mm,
so you get to lean into your expertise a little bit. And we create our own programming, and the idea is to just teach people about NASA, about their missions, about space science, get people enthusiastic and encouraged. So, so I do a lot of telescope nights out in the park. So we look at planets in the night sky, and I talk to a lot of schools and do presentations at libraries, and even got to introduce a showing of Project Hail Mary a few weeks ago. So I keep myself, I try to keep it interesting.
well, cool, very cool. I'm also curious about your path to authoring. How did you get involved with the written word? How did you know that that was something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, so that's something I've always kind of done, and it was always, all the way back to, as far as I can remember back to like high school, I was always scribbling poetry or short stories, and that just never went away. I, had plenty of jobs and careers and college and all this stuff, and would always just kind of scribble stories on the side. Um, and then I think as a lot of people who write short stories do, you get this moment where you wonder what would happen if I tried to write longer? What would happen if I tried a novel? I compare it to a runner who is great at 5Ks and suddenly they're like, well, what would happen if I tried a half marathon? Would I even get to the end? Would that be worthwhile? So I kind of was on the lookout for a story that I thought would have the legs to be expandable into a novel size because my brain was just kind of always writing small things and small worlds and a few characters and would get them the plot would wrap itself up pretty quickly. So I just kind of kept writing short stories until I had an idea that wouldn't fit in a short story that required being drawn out and being built out bigger. So I wrote that and it was awful. I can safely say it's the worst thing I've ever read. So nothing ever came of that, luckily, for me. But at that point, my brain had kind of rewired itself to when I would think of story ideas now, they were always longer, they were always more in depth, there were always wider worlds, more characters. Um, and at that point, I was just kind of on the path to writing novel length all the time.
Nice, nice. As a side note, I was just in Chicago a few weeks ago at C2E2. So first time in the
Oh,
city.
great.
It was great to visit.
H2 is wonderful. I haven't been there for a year or two, but that is a lot of fun. I love going to that.
Yeah, yeah, that was my first time. I was glad to check it out. Um, but speaking of kind of like fandom and audience and things like that. What drew you to the world of young adult?
A few things kind of occurred maybe at the same time. I had, I was always reading a lot of different books. I kind of grew up reading Stephen King. My stepdad would basically read a Stephen King novel and then decide if I was old enough to read that one and then would pass it to me, or not, or hold it for a little bit. So I kind of grew up on a lot of that stuff. But as I got older and started playing with writing novels and when I was still writing the short stories, I ended up there was a lot of very good young adult novels that were getting a lot of attention kind of at that time. So I was reading a little bit of that genre, and I just kind of liked it because I liked that beyond the plot situations that would come up and beyond whatever that author would create for that particular world. I thought the time for those characters was very interesting, that there's a lot going on for people at that age as teenagers, and it just felt like a really good area to work with. And then, I had a daughter, and she wasn't a teenager then, but I knew that she was going to be eventually. And every time I would read something young adult, I would kind of think, would I want her to read this? Would I recommend this for her? What would she get out of this? And I found that I wasn't always happy with who the main characters were and how they were being portrayed. And in some of the things I read, I felt like the heroes and the people who were being betrayed as heroes were being treated as the heroes of the stories, weren't exactly what I would want my daughter thinking were people worth looking up to. Um, so either because they were too perfect and unreal and just just kind of problematic in that sense, or the examples they were setting were terrible and they were being set up as good examples. And I just kind of thought, well, if my daughter's going to be reading this genre, I want to give her something good to read. Let me see if I can create some real characters, some characters who are beautifully broken and really struggling with things, and just real, real, real. I wanted them to come across as real characters that you wouldn't necessarily just look up to, but you could empathize with and recognize parts of yourself in the good and the bad. And yeah, she was kind of the inspiration. I wanted to write good characters for her.
Very cool. Uh, Tell us the pitch for the book. Tell us kind of the byline, if you will, the sort of through line. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, so let's see. So for the short kind of take on it would be that a picture of Isaac when he's 8 years old, on the worst day of his life, makes him world famous, goes viral and makes him famous for the worst thing ever, for his mother being killed. And 10 years later, he makes a discovery um, that again will make him famous if he shares the discovery. But there's nothing more dangerous to Isaac than the outside world and being famous. And at the same time, the discovery has a chance to completely recast his life in a more positive way. Um, but there's a lot of risks involved, and he has to make a decision about what to do.
It's exploring themes of bravery and identity and all of those steps.
Yeah, and grief and how the world sees you versus how you see yourself, and just how you cope with trauma and how you cope with trying to find a place in the wider world when all the wider world has shown you to that point is bad, and you're just not sure if you have a place there or even want a place there.
Yeah. Uh, Powerful work in processing emotions and lots of complex emotions. I think sometimes people underestimate the experiences that young adults have. So many thanks
And I
for
think
going there
that's
in your work.
Yeah, so I think that's what part of why I like the genre. Is that I just not that adults still go through this stuff too. But it just felt like uh the right age to tell some of the stories I wanted to tell. When I would sit and think about it, wasn't even necessarily saying I'm going to only write young adult. It was that I kind of wanted to write young adult and started thinking of stories that would fit that. And then the more I thought of other stories, the more they just fit better told from a teen's perspective. So I just kind
Yeah.
of kept coming up with stories that I felt were, a story I would come up with wouldn't necessarily be, I'm going to come up with a young adult story. It would be, here's a story I've come up with. Well, this would be really interesting from a teenager's perspective. Let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that you have a book that's very grounded in reality. Would you consider it science fiction or science fiction influence given your background with NASA and other such things?
Yeah, I've heard people say it's science fiction. I have seen people call it science fiction, which I guess would fit. There's a lot of science and in it, and it is fiction. I think I always kind of refer to it a little bit more as STEM fiction.
Mhm.
That's just a made up term for me, but it's hard for me to compare it to something like Finding Tell Mary or Star Trek or things like that that you traditionally, view as science fiction. It's just so grounded in the earth and the technology is not, the discovery is advanced, but the technology is not advanced in any way that is today's contemporary world with today's contemporary tools and today's people. There's just science in it. So you could call it science fiction, but I generally refer to it as young adult contemporary with a lean in on STEM. I like my characters to be smart. I think most teenagers I meet are way smarter than we give them credit for. And again, it's one of those things I didn't like in some of the books I was reading was I felt that the teenagers were dumb. And there's dumb people at every age, so that's fine. But um, I just felt like they weren't getting the credit they deserved. And so most of my characters and things I write are very good at what they do. They're very knowledgeable in their area, whether they're artists or in the sciences, whatever it is. They're accomplished and they're intelligent about it.
Absolutely. Would you, or I suppose the question is not would you, but what are you working on now? Are you exploring the next steps in authoring at the moment?
Yeah, so I do have another book coming out in September. It's going to come out September 1st, and this one is an ode to what I grew up with, which were horror novels like Stephen King. So I was never going to get very far without taking my shot at a good ghost story, which are
Hmm.
always my favorite kind of horror stories. Not the gory side, the ghost side, the eerie, the creepy, the psychological. That was more my vibe. Um, so I do have that coming out in September. And yeah, I'm excited to see if I can scare some people.
Cool. Yeah, I've gotten more into the horror genre in the past couple of years, actually, so that might be a follow-up conversation for us to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Where can people find out more about you in terms of social media, convention spaces, websites, and other such things?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's authormarkbenson.com, just my full name together, no characters or anything. You'll get stuff about Isaac in the Sky. You'll get a little bit about upcoming with the horror novel, which is called The Scattering. Um, and then you can also find information and contact me about NASA events through there as well. Um, and then on social media, I'm for NASA stuff on my Facebook. You just search for Mark Benson Solar System Ambassador and you'll find me. Otherwise, I post a lot of stuff about my books on Instagram, and that is at Wayside Writer because
Sounds
I
great.
wrote on the side. So that seemed to fit.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, glad that we connected. May the conversation continue, and,
Exactly.
and many thanks for the chat.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for having me and have a good night.
You too. You too.